Much of the pagan or Roman and Greek understandings of the constellations and the movement of the bodies in the heavens still fits quite well with the ancient Hebrew, firmament-covered or dome-covered semi-sphere cosmography that the Bible describes. It is also quite amazingly interesting to learn that a form of the zodiac, informally known as the Jewish zodiac, representing the 12 tribes of Israel, is said to actually tell the whole story of the Gospel. There is much debate about the origins of this, but it seems that this has great stems to first-century Jewish Kabbalism, which I submit was another of Satan's destructive perversions, group of perverters and perpetrators of diversions, this time of the Jewish persuasion, a result occurring after Satan was defeated by Jesus on that old cross at Calvary. But no matter the age and origins of the zodiac, it is a clear sign that it is all used to muddy the waters about what outer space really is, especially in light of the biblical worldview paradigm that I am proposing. Then, should it or would it be any wonder that ancient forces were working or crafting even back then to paint the heavens into that outer space working viewpoint or philosophical worldview? I have often made the argument to hardcore evolutionist materialists that their usually atheistic viewpoints are shaped by what I call game-playing scientists. These are the scientists who get the research grants, the funding, the college professorships, the tenure, the book deals, the professional respect, the peer-reviewed, published works, the income and support from towing the line. The playing the game that involves embracing materialist, old Earth, global warming, evolutionary supporting cosmology to pass on to future game-playing scientists and its students through academia. This is a controlled, closed system per se that all so-called real science perpetuates in. It is interesting that those real science's true source of funding and support always stems back to some Rockefeller or Carnegie or Rothschild Foundation, or some large corporate subsidiary of one of those known and admitted Luciferians. And of course, the science of medicine is a whole other pharmaceutically perverted can of worms. It's worth pointing out as well that there is an ever-growing number of well-trained scientists and medical professionals who, for many reasons, usually the pursuit of what Francis Schaeffer called true truth, are deciding to not be game-playing scientists anymore. I see no real reason to think that the science and the proliferation of outer space exploration is any different. Then throw in NASA with all of its anomalies and its known roots with Nazi Germany and its scientists, coupled with NASA's work with JPL, Jet Propulsion Laboratories, and their known ties with known Satanists and the Ordo Templi Orientis, and that backing up bus doesn't seem quite so crazy. Here could be a place to address that imposter crazy bus. That bus is the one owned and controlled by the evil forces that I talk about. This imposter crazy bus is called the Flat Earth Society, a well-funded, supported and controlled group of seemingly crazy people and operatives that propose seemingly crazy, absurd and easily disprovable strawman arguments, especially within the outer space, round Earth paradigm in regards to the flat Earth. This, the more credible flat earthers say, works as an attempt to paint with a broad brush as preposterous everything about questioning the heliocentric round Earth outer space paradigm. Should we expect anything less from that great deceiver? To prove this point, here is what comes up first, and quite prominently in a simple straight-up Google search of the term flat Earth. If you still use Google as a search tool, shame on you. Flat Earth theory. Why do some people think the Earth is flat? May 30th, 2017. Members of the Flat Earth Society claim to believe the Earth is flat, and it seems they're serious. But here is something in that article that also makes my point about the whole paradigm of outer space round Earth being drilled or beaten so deeply into our psyche. That article says, the leading flat earther theory holds that Earth is a disk with the Arctic Circle in the center and Antarctica, a 150-foot tall wall of ice, around the rim. NASA employees, they say, guard this ice wall to prevent people from climbing over and falling off the disk. When this skeptic says, fall off the disk, he or she is infusing the outer space paradigm into the critique of a paradigm or argument that says outer space doesn't exist. It employs logically flawed circular reasoning. Could it be that this way of thinking is so very deeply engraved onto our collective modern psyche? Only because of what the religion of scientism and game-playing scientific priests have dogmatically told us throughout the years, and really, throughout the centuries. It is a whole different philosophical way of looking at the world, and it could very well be true that there is no disk to fall off of. Admiral Byrd was quoted as saying that there is a huge landmass beyond Antarctica, and was quite excited to explore it in that short period of time between when he publicly announced its existence and his death and the subsequent Antarctic Treaty. Antarctic Treaty, December 1st, 1959, agreement signed by 12 nations in which the Antarctic continent was made a demilitarized zone to be preserved for scientific research. The treaty resulted from a conference in Washington, D.C., attended by representatives of Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Britain. The Bible actually gives us many clues that what we call the heavens above is most simply God's glory. A Hebraic understanding would call these the second and third heavens. But it is his manifest glory that we mere humans don't truly fathom, understand or see. It is in essence some kind of veil, covering our eternal perceptions of ethereal dimensions. Does our own metaphorical thought of an eternal outer space in some weird way confirm this? Here are a few psalms that support what I propose. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words, whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun, which comes out like a bridegroom leaving his chamber, and like a strong man runs its course with joy. Its rising is from the end of the heavens, and its circuit to the end of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. Psalm 19, 1-6, ESV. This psalm supports the domed over-firmament paradigm more than an outer space one. Notice that it says, the heavens declare his glory, and then it separately says, and the sky above declares his handiwork. Like these are two separate philosophical things, yet we only perceive them as one thing. The first philosophical thing is his glory, what he is, spiritually and physically, and the second philosophical thing is his handiwork, what we can perceive physically. This duality of what God is versus how we perceive him runs throughout this psalm, one that we might think is about outer space. Day to day, the light of the physical sun or spiritual sun pours out speech, meaning we perceive what he is. Night to night reveals knowledge, meaning how we come to philosophically perceive him by making sense of him with what we can't physically see. That physical darkness, or from night to night. There is no speech, meaning what we perceive, nor are there words, meaning what us mere humans could say or come to think about him, whose voice is not heard. The hearing, both philosophically and physically, this one, glory. Another thing to notice is that the whole part of this psalm is about his manifest glory on display as what we call outer space. Consider too that the psalm says that nothing is hidden from the sun's heat. Would that at all be true if what we are trained to believe and what science tells us about outer space really existed, with its supposed cold, dark vacuum and its places where the sun doesn't shine? I'm sure that some could make the point that I am finding something that isn't there in a piece of biblical poetry. But aside from the prevailing thought that God's word is perfectly inspired and Holy Spirit alive and breathing, I'll add that from my own experience in crafting poetry, that very often words can and words do say a whole lot more than what they appear to be saying on their face. To illustrate this, I'll break down this part of Psalm 19 poetically. Jesus, throughout the Gospels, calls himself the bridegroom. This makes the point, then, that his believers are his bride. Psalm 19 goes on to say, in them, the them, being what I have shown the psalm calling God's glory and what man currently thinks of as outer space. In them he has set a tent for the sun. A tent sounds a lot like a firmament, but now notice that it calls the sun a bridegroom leaving his chamber. This sounds a lot like Jesus leaving his domain and coming to earth. And like a strong man, something mortal men can't really eternally become, without Jesus, runs its course with joy. Is this not only a prophecy of David, but an undeniable, daily, quote-unquote, globally visualized and modeled for us picture of Jesus? In that time clock, or what we have been trained to call outer space. And the man of joy, fulfilling the man, Jesus' earthly manifested purpose. In either of his known 2 trips to earth, its rising and meaning his resurrection, is from the end of the heavens, meaning from God, and its circuit, meaning what comes about to the end of them. Is this end a new beginning, when Jesus comes to earth to live and rule among us? Is this a poetic way of saying God's glory is the whole of outer space, and there is nothing hidden from its heat, meaning the atoning grace and philosophical tension of this light of God's glory is being presented to everyone and everything on the earth, perhaps? The second part of the psalm then suddenly shifts into David's perceptions of God's glory, or outer space, and its attributes, and where he analyzes them introspectively. Why does this psalm shift so smoothly from the outer space of God's glory to the inner space of David's heart and soul? Very interesting, I think. Another psalm says, "Lift up your heads, O gates, and be lifted up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in." Who is the King of glory? The Lord strong and mighty, the Lord mighty in battle. Lift up your heads, O gates, and lift them up, O ancient doors, that the King of glory may come in. Who is this King of glory? The Lord of hosts. He is the King of glory. Psalm 24, 7-10, NASB 1995. It is interesting that the one who comes in through the ancient gate where God is, our unfathomable outer space perhaps, is the Lord Jesus, who is later in the Bible said to come again to earth riding on a cloud after appearing to have left us while ascending on a cloud. It is quite interesting that clouds throughout the Old Testament have symbolized God's nearness to us. Now I'm left wondering if the clouds that we all know are all yet another reminder to us, in that they are known to be obscurers to us, and our perception of God's manifest glory on display, something that keeps us from peering and wondering about those deep reaches of so-called outer space. When God is much nearer to us, and like clouds, provides to us the very living water needed for our existence. Is this just another reminder to Christians that the Lord is with us right here and right now? And we are, as he told us to do, to be working on his kingdom, that we are to pray for its coming on earth as it is in whatever we call heaven. We just don't physically see him in our current manifesting physical reality, which strongly suggests that he comes onto earth physically, not just metaphysically or philosophically back from what we call outer space, or is that place that we can't physically or materialistically fathom for now. Is this the same gate that Genesis chapter 3 mentions? I know we already kind of figured Jesus coming down from the heavens, but a better question might be, why is that? I think all these things that I ponder could become very relevant to our way of looking at the world in the coming times. Part 10, the final one. I know you're thinking, yay! I think I quite thoroughly showed how, having a biblical worldview, one can pretty comfortably embrace the idea that deep outer space isn't really a part of our reality, and that it's okay to jump onto that ever-slowing yet backing up crazy bus. This without even having to really show that the Earth isn't a round sphere, as we are taught. The greatest observable evidence of this fact, though, is easily the lack of an observable curve by any of us when a fisheye lens isn't being used to trick us. The horizon never appearing to us as anything but a straight line at any height or distance, along with the fact that the horizon always remains at eye level as you ascend higher. This all should be observable given the easy-to-use mathematical model of how far under the Earth's curve that a distant landmark should be, visually buried by Earth curvature but isn't. This has been demonstrated over and over again by the flat Earth community, as well as their debunking of the old ship disappearing in the distance because of the curve adage. One could look into the mathematical formulas derived by using dogmatic scientism's own numbers about the size of the round Earth and simple geometry. But no matter what the perceived outer space is, one thing about it remains true. The more that we philosophically gaze and wonder about it out there, the more we seem to be gazing and wondering into our very own souls. As David illustrates so beautifully in Psalm 19, could this be yet another indication to us of how God intimately intermingles with our souls, whether or not we want to notice it or even believe it? I know that many readers might think that it is a dumb or meaningless point that I try to make, but the more that I dwell on this, the more important its implications seem to be. If outer space isn't what the powers of this world want to tell us that it is, then what are we to make of it when they tell us about, or even show us space aliens or UFOs? Or what about meteors or asteroids crashing into us? Or solar flares frying our electrical grid? Or devastating pole shifts? Or a mysterious planet X? Or even the concept of global warming? Are these potential cosmic crises really all just more of Satan's weapons of fear to push and prod us into his hell-bent and hell-bound agenda, to a place where we replace the Creator, God of the heaven, with outer space, setting the throne of our heart floating around in a philosophical nothingness when he is much closer to us than we will ever know? For now. And could a person with a truly biblical worldview interpret all of these cosmic, space-like seeming crises as nothing more than God's coming wrath being poured out? Much like that last chapter of God's manual tells us, although I'm coming now to learn that our interpretation of the book of the Revelation might also be deeply flawed. Flawed in that we adhere to a futurist interpretation of the book's prophecies, pushed by those same deceiving Jesuits of known dubious character that have already been mentioned. This interpretation, rather than a perhaps more correct historicist interpretation, one where many of the book's prophecies have already gloriously been fulfilled throughout our geopolitical history, and the Church's battle tribulations with the Roman Empire that went on to become the Roman Catholic Church. I have many more writings explaining this position, and one could look into the great work of David Nikao Wilcoxon. It does seem as though this philosophy of outer space, with its many strange things floating around in it, or travelling in it, either theorized or supposedly pictured, although all imagery from outer space is admitted as being computer-generated or enhanced, but this all seems to be a steaming cauldron of weird projection, prognostication, distraction and prediction never substantiated, of all manners of things to elicit fear. Fear is a weapon of control, and Satan's strongest one. How many times did one of God's angels say, "Fear not," in the Bible? When Jesus said, "I beheld Satan as lightning fall from heaven. Behold, I give unto you power to tread on serpents and scorpions, and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Notwithstanding in this rejoice not that the spirits are subject unto you, but rather rejoice, because your names are written in heaven." Luke chapter 10 verses 18 to 20, King James Version. Was that the fall of Satan that Jesus described, Jesus telling us of the birth of what we now call fear? Is that fearfully created place also where outer space was resultantly, philosophically born? Look where fear and the falling star, Satan, is thought to have come from. Notice how Jesus, in the second part of that verse, tells us the how and the why that we have victory over fear. Is that sheer coincidence? When Psalm 19 says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork." Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. Could it be that when we let Satan fill this void of outer space that might not really exist, that it detracts or actually steals from the glory of God, and that actually mutes the proclamation of his handiwork, and it perverts the heavens' actual poured out speech and knowledge? Could this theft, this setting up of Satan Lucifer onto his fake philosophical throne, be behind much of what ails us all as God's beloved creation? Sure, it's not at all a salvation issue. And we believers can still see the glory of God in what we believe as outer space beyond that firmament, whether real or not. But for all of the non-believers suffering all of the resultant political, scientific, and social and cultural waste that may have occurred by this deception, it most definitely makes me long for God's coming, full and unadulterated glory that his word promises. So if in the future we Christians find ourselves faced with some kind of seeming paradigm-shifting news or science or alien disclosure, or even a cosmic catastrophe reportedly from outer space, not only can we choose to not accept the soul-killing implications of it, but we can know that it isn't just a position held by blind faith, but a position held by biblically supported logic. I'll close my long diatribe with the following story. I met an older gentleman who was a new Christian named Mark at a church that I once attended. He was a bit of a curmudgeon who was beaten down by mental illness and life in general. One day he got his hands on a video entitled Indescribable by Louis Giglio, a great video that illustrated all of the unfathomable and glorious things about our traditional science-taught understanding of outer space, but from a God, the Creator, perspective. After that he was, praise the Lord, gloriously enthralled. He was filled with the uncontainable joy of the Lord. I have never seen any transformation like that before or since. Now juxtapose that mental image with the following sweet but short, little but somewhat famous video story that a person could find pretty easily by internet searching the term Flat Earth Dave and 102-year-old woman. The video shows the sheer joy of tears displayed by the beautiful 102-year-old woman named Ruth, the woman that was shown by Flat Earth Dave how the Earth just maybe not exactly what science has been teaching, confirming what she was taught as a little American schoolgirl just some 90 years ago. This transformation of information excited her as well, stating that she always knew that God was much closer than what she was taught. Later in life, by the round Earth, deep outer space, heliocentric paradigm. Isn't it interesting and gloriously inspiring that the glory of God transcends whatever it is that our own personal perceptions might be about outer space?